بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وجنبنا الفواحش والمعاصي والخطايا والسلام. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear respected brothers, elders, fellow community members. So over the past couple of days, we've been inferring productivity principles from the life of legendary Muslim caliph and figure Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the great grandson of Umar radiallahu anhu. And yesterday we started off on the first principle, which is proactive parenting and involved parenting. And we talked about how his mother, Layla, may Allah bless her, she made 3 very important, crucial, and actually psychologically difficult decisions, which resulted in her son being separated from her indefinitely. So she didn't know when she was going to see her son next, or if she'd even see her son next. But she prioritized and gave preference to his education and his learning. And we can see the fruits of that today with his legacy having been immortalized for 1400 years, and it will continue to be commemorated. So what we have to bear in mind and appreciate first is, for the most part of history, we're going to continue with the parenting point today. For the most part of history, and it's still actually an integral component of our tradition, and this was the case during Umar's time as well, you had gender roles, which were complementary, which supplemented one another. And for women, it was very simple. They played the primary role of caring and raising and nurturing children. And like we said, you are going to find overlaps. And as for men, Allah states clearly in the Quran, الرجال قوامون على النساء. Men are the maintainers and protectors of women. So men are meant to maintain their families in all shapes and sizes, right? So as financial providers, as the breadwinners in terms of security as well, and even psychological safety. But today, unfortunately, and this is a problem which plagues not only Muslim society, but also cultures and traditions around the world, which is, if you want to be a stay-at-home mum, or just motherhood in general is frowned upon, and it's demeaned, and it's looked down upon, because women are generally programmed to chase employment and pursue careers at the expense of their family duties. But it's marketed and it's advertised to them as a way of emancipating themselves, as a way of them gaining freedom, seeking freedom from, I guess you could say, the so-called oppression of the patriarchy. And it's a way of them expressing their liberty and their rights. And because of this movement, which is pure indoctrination and programming, then we have entire generations of children who are lost to such wayward thinking. And more unfortunately, we have mothers who have the natural capability and propensity to raise the next generation of leaders. They're being lost to now employers. So the same tasks that are being laid down by Allah for them to diligently carry out towards their family and towards their husbands and towards their children, they're now carrying out the same tasks to their employers. The only difference is a wage package, right? A wage package which they get from their employers. But on the other hand, this wage package is going to be hand delivered to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So priorities need to be weighed up here. So these mothers are basically being lost, right? An entire generation who are going to contribute to the warriors and the leaders and the intellectuals for the next generation, right? And the interesting thing is, it's only in the last maybe 100, 150 years that this dominant culture, which has really dominated for the past so many centuries of human civilization, only in the past couple of years, hundreds of years, has it actually been distorted, right? And we see the disastrous consequences in front of us today. And what that leads us to today is the dying art of parenting, right? Which is becoming more and more of a rarity. So as we then delve deeper into the ideologies of today, and that is liberalism and individualism and materialism, while our focus is being shifted away from what really matters in the hereafter and anything which can help us prepare for our hereafter, these higher objectives and goals, our minds are being diverted away from that and towards everything and anything to do with the world. right? The gold dust of the world, which will then crumble away into sand. And what that leads to is less and less people actually opting to have children, right? You have people who say, I don't want to get married. Why? Because that means I'm going to have children. And if you have children, then they see it as a burden. They see it as an obstacle to freedom and fun. And if I have kids, that means I'm less active. And that means I have to be more remote and more isolated and cut off from the world, right? So besides seeing it as something which is, I guess, a barrier to their own pleasure, they also see it as a burden. And they've missed the higher objective, an opportunity here, which is to earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the Prophet said that when you're looking for a spouse, then look for a spouse, male or female, who can help you produce generations of Muslims. Why? So that on the Day of Judgment, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with pride, he can say that these are all of my followers and this is my nation. So if there's any motivating factor, if there's any incentive to have children, then it's to earn the pleasure and to actually be an immense source of pride for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So what we need to understand first and foremost is we have to imbibe this quality of excellent parenting within us. And it starts from pouring our hearts into our children. Because I'm sure you can see, and I noticed this as well, as each new generation of children comes onto the block, then we see how degenerate they become and how depraved they become and how worse the generations go from the last one to the next one, right? So parenting is in need of a dire revival. And I'm sure we mentioned it on Saturday, which is if you need a license to operate a vehicle, right, and you need to go through training and you need qualifications and you need to go through theory and the practice, then surely, right, A40, we need licenses to then have somebody's life in our hands, right? You might have the vehicle in your hands, in your arms. You have somebody's life, right? 1, 2, 3, so many different children. They now rely on you. They're fully dependent on you. And if you don't have the necessary skill set, if you don't have the requisite conditions, then you could completely waste a child's life. And I have friends who are social workers and friends who are in the council's caseworker scheme, right? And these are non-Muslims to talk about, but they say that some of these children, they're born out of wedlock first and foremost. Mom and dad, they're out for a party Friday night and they're drunk, intoxicated, something happens, one night stand, and the next thing you know, a child comes from that. There's no commitment, no responsibilities. And some of these children, one of my friends actually said he visited somebody's house and the child all day long was just left in his crib, in his cot, with a phone, right? So that's his form of entertainment, right? And when the parents actually wait for the child to cry for food. This is a 3-4-year-old child, right? And his mobility is being restricted to a cot. When the child's hungry, then just throw a few crisps, right? As if that has some nourishing and as if that has some nutritional value, right? Just throw a few crisps and some even fizzy drinks into the cart and expect the child to fend for itself, as if it's a domesticated animal, right? So, I mean, parenting is so important. So, when we talk about Umar's mother, Layla, then she shoulders his responsibilities with remarkable foresight and a sense of farsightedness, right? And those decisions that she made were very important. And there are many things, many points we can glean from Layla and her husband, Abdul Aziz. But the one main point here that I want to stress the importance of is education, right? So she made sure her son was set up in the best environment under the tutelage of the greatest scholars, and it was under the personal and intimate and vigilant, watchful eye of not just any old teacher or any old social media personality, but Umar's great uncle or grand uncle, who was Ibn Umar, right? And she didn't only stress textbook or rote learning on her son, more so, she wanted to find a role model, right? She didn't want to just provide him with books or an online course or even just some YouTube videos. She wanted to actually outsource education, not to just an impersonal institution, but to somebody who can be there every step of the way and hold his hand and tell him what to do and what not to do. And what's the benefit of that? If you have a role model, if you have somebody you can idolize, somebody you can lionize, then you can absorb religion and piety directly from them. You don't need a textbook because they are a walking, talking textbook. So point number one here is you have to be very vigilant about what your child's watching on YouTube, or even if it's YouTube Kids, whatever social media platform it might be, because they are teachers, right? YouTube is a teacher for your child. Twitter is a teacher for your child. Whatever TV show or cartoon your child's watching, that's a teacher for your child. So there's immense potential and fertile ground for your child to absorb either bad qualities or good qualities. Right? And you do find some Islamically oriented cartoons online. But the thing is, you have to then prepare yourself first and foremost. You have to then scout the ground ahead. Right? What can my child watch? What can't he watch? Is there going to be music in the background? Is it just vocals, a cappella? And are they going to be teaching these cartoons? Are they going to be teaching my children good characteristics, good morals? I'm sure you get those Mufti Menk cartoons nowadays. Then you get, I know Zain Beaker's got his own little, his episodes and cartoons as well, right? So it's wishful thinking to expect our children not to be online. I think we're past those days where you could completely then detach from the online world. So what we have to do now is, the key word here is take a proactive approach and not just thrust and hurl an iPad to your child and say, here, do what you need to do. We need to monitor and police their social media usage, especially from a young age. Right? And the best analogy that I've seen, which comes from a non-Muslim psychiatrist, and she said, a device has to be treated in your household like a loaded weapon. You're never going to give a loaded weapon to your child unattended or unsupervised. Right? So you have to make sure you're there when your child's handling. Even it doesn't have to be a loaded weapon, it can even be an unloaded weapon. Right? You have to make sure you're there, you're supervising that session. You have to make sure the device is being used in a communal space. Right? The worst move that you can ever make is give your child that leeway or that little bit of permission to use a device in their own private space. Obviously, when they're 13, 14, 15, there's not much you can do. But before that, right, if you can hammer home the idea, if you need to do homework and you want to get permission to use the iPad or use a laptop, do it here in the sitting room. Right? Mom's going to be there, dad's going to be there, and the rest of the family is going to be there. Right? Because if you give them a little bit of privacy, then, as they say, curiosity killed the cat, right? They're doing homework, they might be using a browser, and then they might see one ad on the side, and then they click on that, and then they spiral down the rabbit hole, and it's detrimental for their health, right? You don't know what they're going to be exposed to. You don't know the psychological dangers that they may embrace online. So it has to be treated like an unloaded or even a loaded weapon. And in that same article, she said she came across another article from a journalist, right? And she'd been given exclusive access. This was when Steve Jobs was still alive. So she'd been given exclusive access to interview Steve Jobs in his house. So that journalist, for a few weeks, she was preparing herself mentally. And she said, I was genuinely excited because I thought I was going to enter into a wonderland of Apple, right? You're going to have a table made of like just one big iPad, and then all the kids are going to have their own Macs and MacBooks and their own phones. And she said, I was shocked when I walked into his house and I couldn't see a single device in sight. So I thought, okay, maybe there's a special gadget room, right? Maybe they reserve all the fun to one special room. So I asked him over dinner, I asked Steve Jobs, the journalist said, you know, how come I don't see any of your children with any of your products? And he says, I don't give my children my products because I know how much of a distraction they can be. And I know that as children, they have better things to do than waste their time online. But even if they might be doing something productive, even if they say, oh, I'm watching an educational video, who's to say I can't sit down with a book and teach that same lesson to them through natural means and organic means, rather than having an artificial teacher, right? So the first point here is Layla was very, very careful about who's going to be teaching her son. Now, she was leaving her son in Medina. I mean, it's not as if you're going to find charlatans or you're going to find imposters in Medina or teachers who are going to teach the wrong things. You're going to find the companions, you're going to find the epigons, you're going to find scholars. But still, she was very, very particular, and she had this quality of solicitude, right? She was very careful and she was considerate. Who am I going to be leaving my children in? Right? Whose hands am I going to be leaving my children in? And these are the formative molding years. So, like we said, these social media networks and friend circles, we have to be very careful and particular, right? So again, you have to strike a balance. You don't want to be too paranoid and to breathe down your child's neck and ask them for every single person they've spoken to today, or every single stranger they've met, or every single contact on their phone. You don't want to be too paranoid, because that's going to push them away. And if you push them away, they're going to close any doors that you might have. They're going to close any inroads that you might have to monitoring their social media usage. But at the same time, you don't want to be too open and too liberal, and give them general amnesty that you can do what you want, you can do what you like, you can be on your devices for however long you want to be. The best, I mean, every single parent here, these are just guidelines. Each father and each mother listening at home will know which guidelines and principles suit their children best, right? We have to appreciate there is a framework. Islam provides a framework, and you have that flexibility and elasticity to choose, you know what, now might be the best time to give my child a phone, or maybe I can delay it for a couple of years, and maybe I can allow him to watch this and maybe not watch this, and give him, maybe he can use it just on the weekends, or I trust my child to use it for maybe half an hour on the weekdays, right? But there has to be a sort of hierarchy, right? There has to be prioritizations, right? You have to know what your child wants to do and what he should be doing. So we have to be aware of who they're socializing with as well, and who they're hanging around with, who they're mingling in with school. Most importantly, this is the main thing, right? And this is more so for children who are around maybe 13, 14, high school age. You have to be very vigilant. This is one thing that you shouldn't tolerate, right? Whether they have the opposite gender on their phones, right? And I mean, the lines can be blurred, where they say, I'm just talking about school, or I'm just cooperating with a school assignment, or I just need to ask about the homework, right? Because then if you open up the doors, then it'll be very hard to stop them. Like, it's like the snowball effect, right? Like you just push one domino, and then you've set off a chain of events that will prove very hard to stop. So, I mean, you can't exactly check the phone, you can't exactly ask them for checks every now and again, but you just have to keep on top of it, right? And how can you do that? By setting the standards from a young age, right? So telling them from a young age that, look, we're going to be open in this family, right? We're not going to have any secrets. Nobody's going to have, you can have your own private life, but, you know, we're going to come to the dinner table and we're going to discuss. And this is another problem, maybe something we've lost because we've tried to shed cultural baggage from the subcontinent, thinking it to be backwards and antiquated, which is, we've lost it. It's a sunnah as well. We've lost the sunnah of sitting together and eating. Even if it's not from one plate, just sitting in the same room and eating at the same time. Like, how many situations do we know of where mom's cooking at home, and then she'll leave three separate dishes on the worktop, and dad will come after work, he'll take it and sit in front of the TV, and the daughter will come and she'll go in her room, and the son will come and he'll go and hide himself in his room. They're all eating at the same time, but just in different spaces. So how is that meant to provide the family with, you know, a forum for the dad to say, you know what, I did this at work today, and what did you learn today at school, and what did you do today in high school, what did you learn in madrasa today? So even if you don't care about what somebody else did, it at least shows the other family members that this is a safe space, right? This is a space you can open up about whatever's happened at school. Because I feel as if, and I'm in contact with youth and youngsters and lads today, and I feel as if there's a divide and a disconnect between youth who are probably around high school age, college age, and their parents. They don't feel like they can open up to their parents. Like, even though they have these burning questions, and they feel like their parents can answer them, but they just feel embarrassed. They just feel as if, I've never had that one-to-one chat with my dad before, or my mom's never really entertained my misgivings, or maybe some problems that I've had, or my anxieties. I don't feel comfortable opening up to them. And if we either explicitly or implicitly push them away, then they're going to find sources of comfort outside, or more dangerously online, right? And then you can't monitor what they do after that, because we've closed the doors, right? So we need to have, I guess you could call it, a healthy level of skepticism. So don't be too intrusive, or don't intrude on their privacy too much, but at the same time, let them know that they're there if you need a chat. Let them know that if you need to talk about anything, you're there. But it has to start from a young age, where their usage of social media is being monitored, right? And especially being proactive with useful company. So I remember there was a scholar who said, as parents, as fathers more so, you need to introduce your children, more so your sons, to 3 different personalities in the community, right? Because as a dad, you can't be Superman. You can't do everything. You can't be the scholar, and then you can't be the health and exercise guru, and you can't be the entrepreneur. You can't be everything for your son. So you need to know your limitations as a parent, and then you need to know how you can plug up these holes. And especially for sons, there are 3 types of people that we need to introduce our children to. Number 1 is a successful businessman, right? So you might just be working a bog standard 9-to-5 job, but you need to have somebody who's successful, who has a business which is thriving and prosperous, but at the same time, his business is run along an Islamic model, right? So they know that they can be a good Muslim and they can be a successful entrepreneur, or they can achieve, dizzying heights of success in this world as well. Because again, what people think is, youngsters think, if I am a good Muslim, then that means that I have to subscribe to a life of poverty. If I'm a good Muslim, then that means that I can't do what I want to do. If I'm a good Muslim, then that means that I can't pursue my dreams. Right? So you need somebody who can tell them, look, Islam, like we said, it provides us with a framework. The beauty of Islam is it's not rigid, right? And it's not too, micromanaging. It's not too restrictive, right? It provides you with a guidebook, and then you can then copy and paste your own situation onto that guidebook. And Islam is flexible enough to accommodate for people's different situations and backgrounds and dispositions, right? You just have to tap into this conversation of Islam. So a successful businessman. The number 2 is, you could say, a fitness geek or a fitness guru, somebody who's keeping your son in good health. And as a South Asian community, I think we are allergic to 2 things. Number 1 is the outdoors, and number 2 is exercise, right? And just a healthy lifestyle in general. I think there was a study carried out a few weeks ago on eating habits for South Asian Muslims in Ramadan, right? So the amount of food that we consume and the amount of money that we spend on food in Ramadan actually triples. Whereas Ramadan is meant to be a month of detachment, of disconnection, of detox, right? Not just spiritually, but also physically, because fasting has its physical and physiological benefits as well. But we're completely defeating the purpose if we're going to starve our bodies for 16 hours and then try and compensate for those 16 hours in 1 hour, right? No wonder we suffer from health problems, and we have diabetes, and we can't stand up, and then when we get to old age, you have to sit on a chair, right? All of these health problems come from a lack of savvy fitness techniques, right? And it doesn't mean that it's either you go to the gym or you let your body just crumble and fail, right? You can then go for walks, you can have bike rides, you can have your own little gym space in your room, but not everybody's going to have that propensity. Not everybody's going to have that inclination towards fitness. That's why source somebody, right? Scour your locality for somebody who is sort of a fitness geek and get your son introduced to them. And the third one is an intellectual, right? So ideally it should be a scholar, but it doesn't have to be a scholar. Somebody who can answer those hard-pressing questions for your son, or even your daughter, about atheism or sexism or feminism, or these questions on morality and evolution, right? Things that children are being taught in school, things which are being crammed down their throats, right? These things are being forced upon your children by imposition, right? And as a mother, as a father, as a parent, you can't be expected to provide for your child intellectually as well as financially, right? So that's why you have different people in society who can deliver different services, right? That's why when our children do go to university, then we shouldn't just force them down that narrow path of either you become a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer, right? These the 3 stereotypical careers for a South Asian child, right? We have to tell them, look, you can do what you like, just make sure that it's honorable, just make sure that it's intellectually stimulating, because what we find is we just focus on feeding our stomachs at the expense of feeding our brains, right? So it's just about, why do you want to be a doctor? Well, because it pays well. Why do you want to be an engineer? Because it pays well, right? Do something which can benefit the community, right? I'd be surprised if you come across doctors and you ask them, what even took you into medicine in the first place? And they say, you know what? I want to serve the community. I want to serve the creation. And if I can serve the creation, then that's a stepping stone to serving Allah. Because Allah says, or the Prophet said in Hadith, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ, which is the most noble of beings in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people who have the most value in Allah's sight are those people who can deliver the most amount of services, render the best service to their fellow human beings. Right? So that's what we have to sort of steer our children towards. And I think the other night I overheard Mawlana Farooq. I think Mawlana Farooq's been talking about in his After Fajr discourses on career opportunities and a career path. So anyway, these three people are very important. Successful businessman, a fitness guru, and an intellectual. Right? So now the second thing you have to appreciate about Layla is, like we said yesterday, their family, the whole family was relocating to Egypt. They weren't just moving to the outskirts of Medina. They weren't just going to Mecca. Right? They were moving, transnationally. They were moving across the border. They were moving to a different, faraway land. Right? So they were leaving him in a place where they might not ever visit again, in a place where communication, or in a time where you didn't have all of these technological advancements, right? So a time when it'd be very difficult to then get a message across to somebody else. It might have taken weeks, right? So here she's, as a mother, she is sacrificing physical proximity with her favorite child, but she's prioritized a better environment for him, right? Which is a huge sacrifice in and of itself. You also had another famous figure, Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i was actually born in Gaza, but his father passed away at a young age. Well, when Imam Shafi'i was young. So he was orphaned at a young age, and that means that his mother was widowed. So she actually moved from Gaza to Mecca so that her son could be in the company of illustrious scholars, so that she can give her son the best possible education. And look what that got her, right? Imam Shafi'i then went on to form one of the 4 canonical schools of law that people, hundreds of thousands of people today still subscribe to. And all of the reward for that, who's that going to go to? His mother. Right? She could have stayed in Gaza. She could have said, you know what, I'm a widow and I don't have anybody to provide for me, so we're going to stay here and you can do what you need to do. You can find employment, or you can become a low-wage laborer. Right? She could have chosen that career path for her son, but she prioritized her own son, right? Not herself. And to my young friends here, right, to the youth, you will only ever find 2 people in your life who do things just for you, without any ulterior motives, and they'll be your mom and your dad, right? They won't want anything from you. They don't want anything in return. They might pay for your tuition fees. They might pay for your university fees, £9,000 for 5 years. They will never want to see a penny from that. They'll never ask for anything in return. The only thing they want from you in return is just to see you succeed. That's it. Now imagine how much hurt you're causing them when they send you to school and they see that you're failing and you're not achieving well, and you're coming back with 3s and 4s or D's and E's, right? They've pumped and injected their hearts and their blood, sweat, and tears into you, right? So the least you can do is to at least display and exhibit a return of the effort that they pumped into you, right? So now the point is here, second to last point before we end, how do we break this cycle of bad parenting? Now, I'm not saying everybody here is a bad parent. I'm just saying that we always have room for improvement. And as a Muslim, the worst quality you can succumb to is stagnation, right? Where you're not advancing, where you're not developing. Because in the Quran, Allah says, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, right? We make this supplication in every single prayer. We ask Allah to guide us to the straight path. Now, the word Allah is using here for path, sirat, is very interesting because it actually refers to an uphill path, a path which is on an incline, right? So now, if you're, let's say, for example, in Blackburn, and you're driving your car, and you leave your car in neutral on a hill, it's going to roll backwards. That's what we call stagnation. So if you're not in some forward-thinking gear, like first gear, second gear, third gear, you're going to risk regressing and actually going backwards, right? Pouring water over all the effort that you've made. So you can't even be in neutral, because if you're neutral, you're still going to roll backwards. You need to be in first gear or second gear. You need to constantly be looking on the horizon. How can I improve myself, right? And the most important point here, the most important quality you can cultivate within yourself is the Quranic quality of ihsan. This has to be inculcated into every single person's lifestyle. What is ihsan? Well, ihsan simply is excellence, right? The pursuit of excellence. What that means is anything that a Muslim does, whether it's worldly, whether it's to do with the hereafter, has to be done with an exertion of the utmost effort and attention and undivided and concerted effort. Right? Whatever you do, it doesn't have to be religious. It doesn't have to be worldly. It can be anything. You just have to do your best. Why? Because Allah says, the Prophet told us, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَتَبَ الْإِحْسَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. Allah has decreed ihsan in everything. Meaning, Allah expects us to be excellent in whatever we do, right? And that also applies to parenting. And it's not enough for us to say, we've put 50% in or 60% in, 70% in. Allah is expecting 100%, right? He's expecting us to strive diligently in rearing our children. And in Islam, we have we resonate with the saying, a jack of all trades, but a master of none, right? That's not how we want to be in Islam, right? You be excellent in what you do. And if you can't be excellent in something, then like we said, you outsource it to somebody else. So just to focus on the last point from Umar's mother, Layla, ihsan, the quality of excellence, is not just limited to worship. It's not as if you have to perform an amazing salah, or you have to fast perfectly, or you have to give zakah immaculately. This quality of ihsan applies to every single sphere of human life. Right? In school, you want to study to the best of your ability. You don't want to waste your time. You want to acquire a deep understanding of all of the subjects and aim for high grades. Now, when it comes to parenting, then you have to put 101% behind your child. And you know what the stark reality is? Right? The scary reality is you can pour your heart out to your child and still you're not guaranteed a return. And why is that? Because we have the example of Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh alayhi salam was a prophet. If anyone, he put 110% into his children. But still, the outside influences, external influences of the world got the better of his son. And his son ended up leaving the world without faith. Right? So now the paradox here is, why would Allah want me to put and exert so much effort which might go to waste, which might be of no use and of no avail? Well, it's so that you can present yourself towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and tell him, at least I tried my best. And ihsan, really, the quality of excellence, isn't for yourself, isn't for your child, it's for Allah's sake. Because when Jibreel alayhi salam was asked the Prophet, Mal ihsan, right? What is excellence? He didn't ask what is excellence in worship, or what is excellence in business, or what is excellence in politics. He just says, what is excellence in life? But how can I be an excellent person? So the Prophet said, An ta'budullah ka'annaka tarah. You have to worship Allah as if you see Allah. And worshipping isn't just restricted to the mosque. Please, please, please eradicate this idea from your mind, this misconception, right? This misunderstanding, which is, I'm only a Muslim and I only have to abide by the principles and precepts of my religion when I'm in the mosque. But outside, in the social domain, in a political setting, in a financial setting, Islam has no say or no bearings on what I do, right? That's a gross misconception which really waters down the beauty of Islam. Because Islam is, in Arabic, it's known as deen, right? Deen is not a religion. Deen is not a religion. Deen is not a creed. Deen is not a set of beliefs. Deen literally means a way of life. It is how you have to conduct yourself and carry yourself throughout every single step and every single aspect of life. That's what you call deen. So you have to carry out everything as if Allah's watching you, right? As if Allah's there with a notepad and a pen and He's assessing your every single move, right? He's evaluating your every single action, right? So just like if you have, I remember in madrasa, this is the best example. If you stand there in front of your children whilst they're praying salah in front of your class, then they know that Musab's watching, so they're going to perform the best salah they've ever performed in their lives. Just because they know that my teacher's watching me. They know that he's going to check, he's going to make sure that my hands are placed properly. I'm looking at the place of sajda and the placement of my feet is immaculate as well. So that's how we have to worship Allah. As if Allah is there, He's going to ask us about every single thing that we've done. So we want to exert ourselves fully, 101%, excellently into parenting, not because we want to see, that's a secondary motive, right? Not because we want to see our child succeed or because we want to then succeed, but because Allah wants us to do good. It's as simple as that. As a Muslim, your job is to submit to Allah. So there are 4 ways that can be done, right, when it comes to parenting. Number 1 is to spend quality time with your children. Give them your undivided attention. Number 2 is to build a close bond of love with your child. And I'm sure we mentioned the 3 A's the other day. I'll repeat them now. And this can help us create and forge a bond of love with our children, which is the 3 A's: affirmation, attention, and adoration. And these 3 are very important because if they don't find these from you, they'll look for it from somewhere else. Number 3 is to nurture their individual talents. And the last point, which is what we're going to end on here, is you have to play an active role in their education. And just like Umar's mother, Layla, she was active, she was involved in his education, right? And that's what maybe we can say now contemporary culture proves to be a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because we outsource education to the school and the educational system. And it makes sense to do that because they provide the best facilities and the best tools for learning. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword because it generates a sense of laziness in parents, where we think, oh, right, we're outsourcing education to a tutor or to a teacher or to an establishment or to a host of institutions, actually. So parents now fall into a false sense of security, where I can take a step back now, right? And I can disassociate myself from my child's educational exploits. Or why is that? Because, oh, the teacher will take care of it, right? And the madrasa teacher will take care of it. And the head teacher will overlook his progress, not realizing that your child spends majority of his or her day with you. Just take the madrasa, for example, right? The child is only with the madrasa teacher for 2 hours during the day. You can't expect the madrasa teacher to teach your child salah and Quran and how to perform ablution and then how to be a good person and then how to be dutiful to one's parents and good characteristics and good conduct. But that's unfair on the teacher. The teacher's job is to plant the seed. And for you as a parent, your job is to now nourish that seed, to make sure it's being given and provided with the best nutrition and the best nourishment, to make sure it's being watered daily. Because what I noticed when I was teaching with a lot of parents is, as a teacher, you make so much effort on them during the day, and that effort's just wasted. Right? Water's poured over all of that effort at home because you might be at mosque for 2 salah, right? Asr and Maghrib. And then you expect the parents, look, just make sure your child's praying Fajr and then Dhuhr and Isha, right? And the parents are completely disconnected, right? I've actually heard parents say, you know what, at least it's good that he's praying 2 salah at the mosque or 2 salah at madrasa. Why are we lowering our standards, right? We should be pushing our children to achieve excellence, not just to be content with the bare minimum, right? And even when it comes to learning your daily Quran portion, your daily allotment of Quran for the child, 5, 6, 7 lines, right? The teacher can't constantly be breathing down the child's neck. The teacher can't micromanage the child at home. All the teacher can say is, look, you're going to be in trouble if you don't learn tomorrow. The rest of it is then delegated and consigned to the parent, which is, look, you have to make sure your child's sitting at home for 10 minutes in the morning and then 10 minutes in the evening, right? I can't come to your house and snatch your child's phone away or confiscate his phone or ground him. That's down to the parent, right? And you can't expect the child, the teacher to shout at your child all the time, right? You can't expect this to be a good cop, bad cop scenario where so many parents have messaged me and in the diary saying, you know what, can you give him, a bit of a nudge? Can you shout at him because he's not learning at home, right? I can't be the evil devil, right? I can't be the bad cop here. And you just, you give him all he wants and you give in and you say, you know what, you don't want to read today, that's fine. You don't have to, you can read tomorrow, or you can only read for 10 minutes today, right? It takes a two-pronged approach, right? This is an enterprise. This is a multi-agency enterprise. It takes the parents and the teachers and the community. But that can only happen if the parents are involved, right? Now, ask yourselves, when was the last time you sat down with the child and said, what did you learn today? Right? Or maybe you can teach me something that really inspired you today at madrasa. Or what was the dua that you learned today? Maybe you can tell me at home. Not even with madrasa, even with school as well. Right? You know what, sit down, let me test you on your 10 times table. Or what did you learn in science class today? Or in food tech, did you bring anything home for me to eat? Or maybe you can cook it today for us. Even though you might not really be interested, it's just to show your child, to let them know that you are actively involved and you're there, you're a part of their life. Because we're going to be working from 9 to 5, right? We might just find some time to spare for ourselves, right? And we might only be able to find some of our own downtime. So it's very important that we create that time. And there's no excuse of, I don't have time. That time has to be curated. That time has to be found, right? So when it comes to schools and madrasa, I'll finish up on this last piece here, which is what you have to do is evaluate your school, right? And its record and the teachers. And you have to make sure that your child is in capable hands, right? And what kind of an environment is being engineered in that school? Because not all schools are the same. Each school has its own taste and its own environment and its own ethos, right? So you want to look for a school which has an Islamic ethos. You want to look for a school which pushes traditional values. And no matter how excellent your home instruction might be, you have to then encounter and challenge the fact that, you know what, there are going to be external outside influences like peer pressure, which can, really set you back with whatever you're doing at home. So think about it. You don't want to be shipping off your child during their highly impressionable years. And really, that's 13 years of your child's life that they're going to be outsourced to an institution. But you don't want to realize too late that maybe their education might not have been the best. Maybe I should have taken a more proactive step, right? And it's not just about education. It's not just about a diploma or a certificate or a qualification at the end. It's about producing human beings and citizens who can really serve their communities and Muslims who can serve their creator, right? So what we need to do is, last point here, which is you might want to join your school board. You might want to join the parents committee or take up a governing role in the school, right? You might want to, if you have the financial means for homeschooling, if you have the logistical and, mental gymnastics to homeschool your child, then that's maybe an opportunity which should be taken, right, by the scruff of the neck. And we've seen what's being pushed out there in some schools, right? And sometimes you don't have a choice, right? It's a statutory law as to what's taught to your child or not. And if homeschooling might not be the best way forward for you, then at least become a part of your child's journey in school. And in madrasa, right, these diaries, how often are we signing them? How often are we looking at whether they're getting excellent or very good or whether they're having behavioral issues? Right? Don't just reduce your interaction and your involvement to the parents' meeting once a year. And after that, let the parent or let the teacher do what he needs to do. You have to take a proactive and, an involved step in your parenting approach, just like Layla, the mother of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. May Allah be pleased with both of them. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allows us to be proactive parents. And inshallah, tomorrow we're going to discuss something called the abundance mentality, which can be again inferred from the life of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. We ask Allah to accept our gathering here today and He makes these last few moments of Ramadan fruitful for us. Ameen.